Hello. Today, we're diving into the rich heritage of Palm Beach County to uncover the stories that shape our community. By honoring the history and the legacy of our ancestors, we pay tribute to their invaluable contributions while reflecting on the values that unite us as a community. Our shared history serves as a powerful reminder of who we are and the journey that we've undertaken to create the vibrant place that we now call home. In this show, we'll engage with local historians about the triumphs of Black leaders and the struggles as well, and we'll explore the significance of various historical landmarks throughout the county. And discussing this show and these initiatives, what we're going to do is we're aiming to preserve our history and the culture of our county. And so joining us today is Dr. Alicia Wynn, Mr. Bill Nix, and Miss Debbie Range. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm so excited to be here and to have our local historians here to not only learn more about you, but also about the rich history of Palm Beach County. So to begin, I just want to hear from you. Why is history so important to you? And we'll start with you, Dr. Wynn.
You know, thank you for having me. I think history is so important for me because it is important to see, one, representation of yourself. You know, growing up, it was important to know about even personally your local history and the contributions of those who came before you and how they established things within a city, a community, and a neighborhood. So it's important for me so that I can see representations of what people did and then give me a sense of identity and a sense of pride in myself to do those same things and carry this legacy out of the history that has been established locally in this city and as well as in this state and the country.
Awesome, awesome. And what about you, Mr. Bill?
Kind of same thoughts, a sense of identity, who I am. And not just me, but it's important, I think, for the whole community to understand where they came from. And when I said where they came from, it's not just the place, but the people. And so we need to know who our people were, because we are actually a reflection of that and a legacy of that. So for us as Blacks, we can go back so far, but not far enough. And so we really need to understand, where did this all come from? What was our culture based on? Why was that? So you get a sense of who you are, and you get a sense of what you can become. And so it's critical now, I think, because of all that's going on about Black history, that we as a community must, in fact, focus on this to give us strength, to give us courage, and to know that we have a better future than what we have.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, history is just so important to me in everything I do. I don't come across anything throughout the day where it's something about history from the past, from the ancestors. With history, it's making the connections. And once you make those connections, you truly find out how we relate to so many other cultures, so many other people throughout the county, throughout the state, wherever we are. But it's so important to know who we are and what those contributions and achievements were that are often missing from our textbooks. So as we uncover that, I'm a huge researcher. I'd love to read and try to find out what's missing and make that connection. And talking to the students, just trying to get them to understand the relevance of who they are, why they should be so proud of who we are and from where we came from, the struggles, how resilient our people were. And so every day, I wake up and it's something else with history. There's not a day I don't do some type of research. But history is just that important as you uncover the facts, fit them into the empty puzzle pieces where we're often missing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I'm originally from Alabama and transitioned to Palm Beach County over a decade or so ago. And in coming to this county, you begin to learn about so many different things that are important to the people who were born here and the community. And I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by individuals who I consider mentors who have kind of shaped my journey along the way. I'm curious to know who you would consider your mentors growing up, or as you engaged and embarked on this journey towards really embracing your history and lifting it up in a special way. Start with you, Mr. Nix.
I'm from Atlanta,
Okay.
Georgia.
Okay.
I was born on the campus of Morehouse College.
Oh, wow.
So my mentors started 2 days after I got on campus as a baby in terms of people like Benjamin Elijah Mays. He was the president at the time, and just that whole educational campus was a history lesson, because here at the time there were professors and faculty members and staff that had created history. Just the fact that they were there. And so very early on, learned the history of Morehouse, learned the history of HBCUs and how important that was. So to me, it was kind of ingrained. And I mentioned Dr. Mays, but there are many, many others who were historians who were making history at the time. And so growing up in civil rights, which is where I grew up with, the Martin Luther Kings, the Daddy Kings, all of them, the Andrew Youngs, they were all part of my bringing up. And so it was within me.
Yeah, those are quite a few legacy individuals.
Yes.
I didn't hear you say Maynard. I don't know if Maynard was a part of that.
Yes, man, it was definitely a part of that. In fact, fortunately, I knew Maynard, I knew of him when he was a student, because they used to call me Little Nix. Everybody called me Little Nix. But the beauty of that was, it made me Maynard, that I could see these people as students.
Oh, absolutely.
And all of a sudden, 2-3 decades later, making history.
Making history. I love it.
Yeah.
What about you, Miss Debbie?
My immediate mentor, I became familiar with her with my job at the School District of Palm Beach County, and that was Dr. Marianne DuPont. And so Marianne DuPont was my immediate supervisor. She was assistant superintendent. And she came into my life, made such a powerful impact when she appointed me to be the manager for the Office of African and African American Studies. We knew the law had been passed, but I was in the department for ESOL and department for everything that went into multicultural education. And so I was honing my skills there when she approached me to ask me to do this. And when she did, I didn't get the invitation right away. I was sitting there waiting for my appointment with her, but I heard this very energetic conversation, and it kind of ended with, and those people don't have any history anyway. I had no idea that it related to what she was going to meet with me about. And so it kind of reverberated with me once she met with me, and she said, I need you to do this project. And then I connected that to, they don't have any history. And so that kind of sparked something within me. I can tell you that history was not my favorite course in high school, let alone college. But she immediately sent me out to a couple of trainings, to a couple of workshops. And it was like I could not hear enough, I could not listen, I could not read enough. I was just constantly soaking it in. I met some very outstanding professors who really became additional mentors to me, including Dr. Malefi Asante, and did not get to meet Dr. John Henry Clark, but we talked on the telephone over and over. He was older then, was losing his sight, and I told him about the law, and he said, gee whiz, we don't have that up here, but I'll help you all I can. Dr. Asa Hilliard, who's over at Georgia State. And so these people surrounded me, and they said, we're going to help you because we don't have a law like that in our states.
Now, when you talk about the law, just for the viewing audience, what was the law that you're referring to?
So in 1994, through the help of two outstanding congressmen, they presented this bill for teaching African and African American studies in every subject and every grade level. And of course, that passed in 1994. So that required instruction was that it be infused into every subject. However, the content had to go back to the history of Africans and on the continent of Africa.
Okay.
And it had to go back to that period before slavery was introduced. So in essence, don't start a kid's history on a slave ship.
Right.
Because of the classical civilizations, because of the kings and queens, and just because of development of nations surrounding that continent, which had every natural resource that other areas didn't. And so the law required that we create a curriculum and then that we do training. And the training wasn't just in African and African American studies, and the African and includes the diaspora, and the diaspora of all of the people who were dispersed around the world from the continent of Africa.
Now, this is a state law?
State
And
law.
is that law still in
It is
effect?
13 years old as of June 2024.
Wow.
And it's still in effect. The office is still in effect.
Okay.
And it's become very successful. We still get pushback. There's some implementations, barriers to implementation, but it is very much effective. The gentleman who took my place when I retired is Brian Knowles, and he's doing a phenomenal job.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Brian is dope. Dr. Wynn, you're one of the only anthropologists that I know, and always fascinating to hear you engage in talking about history, and you're involved with a lot of different projects, and including the oral project, and we'll talk about that a little later. But who would you consider as some of your mentors?
Well, I would say my first major mentor was at the time, Dr. Sheila Fleming. She was my African American history professor at Bethune-Cookman, now University. That's when I first got my first glimpse of how powerful and important it is for us to know our history. And she took us through a journey that I had never experienced in K through 12 schools. So that was kind of an open door for us, and even explore just the history of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. I had opportunity to serve as a tour guide in Dr. Bethune's home my senior year. And so it was from that introduction with Dr. Fleming and the opportunity to work in Dr. Bethune's home, who's a mentor in itself of, this path and journey of my own, from her. But then also Dr. Catherine Kazaitis at Georgia State University, where I was introduced with connecting anthropology and the importance of history, because anthropology looks at the interconnectedness and the relationships. So you cannot understand people unless you understand the history first, and why, the why, and history answers the why. And so it was through that Dr. Susan Greenbaum was my mentor at USF, and Dr. Cheryl Rodriguez, who combined African American history and anthropology together in African American anthropology. And so I went through this journey of building, this African American studies into anthropology, and how you can do and mesh both together. And then lastly, at Florida Atlantic University, my professor, Dr. Susan Love Brown, who did so much research on understanding the psychology of Tuskegee Airmen. And so combining the two. And so these women throughout my academic career were pivotal in the direction that I've been going, and it just modeling them here. So.
Okay. That's really interesting. And I did mention the oral project that you engaged in maybe several years ago. Can you talk a little bit about that, and what it was, and what was the purpose?
Yes, it was a Palm Beach County virtual African American history project, oral history project. And so in July of 2020, through the sponsorship of the Children Services Council, Palm Beach County, and the School Board District, we established a oral history project, first to be face-to-face, but due to COVID, we put everything online. And so we paired 5 young people with 8 elders throughout the county representing Pahokee, Belle Glade, Riviera Beach, West Palm Beach, and Delray Beach. And so the youth were trained the first couple months of the project about how to the proper etiquette of interviewing, the proper etiquette online interviewing. But in that process too, they had to do a lot of research. And so I did training with them of learning the local history first, so that as they prepare and when they interview an elder, they'll understand some background about what the history before they even engage with the elder. And so as a result, we did a documentary, a booklet for our elders, as well as a web page for our elders. And that exhibit, is still exhibit we showcase today. Mobile, a traveling exhibit as well. So that has been very successful. And the key thing is, the youth are empowered by it. It is their project. They do the research. They do the interviews. They even review and do the editing of the transcripts of the interviews. And as a result, they gain all these skills, listening skills, communication skills, an appreciation for their elders, but most of all, learning their local history in their respective cities. Because they would interview a student from Delray, interviewed an elder from Delray.
Yeah.
So it puts them, even the demographics and the geography of where they're located, of like, oh, this used to be here, and they can kind of understand it and appreciate it a little better.
It's so important that we bridge that gap between our current generation and our,
Yes.
the past. That there's such a gaping hole,
Yes.
and especially with our nexters, Gen X, and the nexters, and those individuals who are really not connected to history the way that they should be. And so
Yes.
that's really an awesome project. Mr. Nix, talk a little bit about the Black Maroons. I think most people don't really know about they may have heard of the Maroons, but don't really know who they were and the significance that they bring to our Florida history. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, basically the Maroons coming from Africa, as we were coming over, those were the ones who got off the ship and went into the area and were not enslaved at the time. So we had Maroon colonies. One of the biggest ones that people have heard of is the Gula Geechees in South Carolina. But there were many more that went up, including in Florida. Also, you had them coming, if they were enslaved, they came down into Florida from South Carolina, and they would establish their own communities. So one of the things that was happening with Florida is even the Native Americans and the Creek Indians up in Alabama, they would sometime come down into Florida, and they were called runaways. And that name became Seminoles. And then you had the blacks coming down from Georgia, South Carolina, and they were Maroon colonies. And it was a difference because they were in Florida, which was Spanish. It's a different kind of quote unquote slavery. And so interesting down here is the Indians, the Seminoles, and the Maroon colony of blacks had a symbiotic relationship. And so they worked together. And one of the things that the Africans brought, or the African Americans brought, was ability to understand language. So one of the things they helped them do, the Seminoles, was to talk to the Americans in their language. And they were advocating for them as well. There's a person by the name of Abraham, and he was one that really talked to the United States government on their behalf. So they had this symbiotic relationship, and they fought together. And so there's a couple of things One was there was a fort called Fort Negro up around the Panhandle. And so that was a place that had not just room, but had quote unquote free blacks and others, slaves that came into it. And they kind of offered a buffer between the west side of Florida and Louisiana and Alabama and the east side. But the symbiotic relationship turned into a point where down here especially, and when I say down here in Palm Beach County, they would fight against the Americans at the time. And they fought together. And here, this was interesting, and this is really what got me also interested in history. But General Jessup, which was a general, brought in Tennessee volunteers. There was 1,500 of them to do battle with 300 Seminoles and blacks. And they had two wars down here. One was called Powell, and one was Jessup, the two people leading. They really never lost, the Seminole, black Seminole never really lost a battle. They never lost a battle. And not just those two, others, because they were smarter than them. But when they did the last one, which was around Loxahatchee, which is up in Jupiter, actually Jessup raised a white flag, said, let's sit down and let's talk about this thing. He sent up a letter to Andrew Jackson at the time, said, listen, we've defeated them, but why don't we give the Seminoles and the blacks everything south of Palm Beach County? There's nothing down here anyway but swamp, and that we just give them. And they sent up to Washington. Andrew Jackson sent down a flotilla. They came into the fort and actually captured them. They never lost a battle.
Oh, wow.
But that became the beginning of setting them on the Trail of Tears. But prior to that, the blacks and the Seminoles worked together. As you know, up in Fort Mose, up in St. Augustine, black fort there, they worked together. But because Andrew Jackson sent the flotilla down to we have the Trail of Tears.
Now, we've heard of the Buffalo Soldiers. How were they connected to the Buffalo Soldiers?
They actually the blacks became the Buffalo Soldiers. And the way that happened is, you have to understand, when they surrounded the fort, it was a fort of at Loxahatchee, they went over to Tampa, they went over to Mobile, went up and went to Oklahoma. When they got to Oklahoma, the Native Americans at Oklahoma didn't necessarily appreciate the blacks. So the blacks actually went down and fought in Mexico because they were so astute at how to do war in the brain and otherwise, mind. And the United States Army saw what was happening and said, these are warriors. And who are they? And the Seminoles said, well, we call them buffalo because of their hair, soldiers. And so the United States Army pulled them in with the 9th and 10th Cavalry. And they were actually the ones that cleared out the West for them. So, as I tell people, the Buffalo Soldiers started in Jupiter and walked.
So cool.
That's American history.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm
That's
sure that's
Florida
history.
history.
A lot of people
And they
just
don't know it.
don't
And
know
it
it.
wasn't until President Obama gave them the honor. They were up in Fort Hood in Kansas, I think it's, that gave them the honor that they deserved of what they had done. They also fought in the War of 1812. And so they needed to get this. And this is this history that we have to continue to tell people
Absolutely.
about that. Excuse me, I didn't mean it, War of 1812. But we have to continue to Spanish American. We have to continue to tell them that.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'll need to get up to the reenactment and
Yes.
and learn a little bit more myself. Because
Yeah,
it sounds
every
very-
every
very exciting.
January there's a reenactment up in Jupiter on the Loxahatchee battlefield, and it's well worth it. Oh, let me just say this too, and has started. The Seminoles from Oklahoma would come every year for this memorial and remembrance.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it
very
was-
cool.
Nice.
That's some awesome history. We have the pleasure, Ms. Rains, of working with you and Barbara Cheeves to facilitate the Black History and Culture Tour, where we go around and we see various sites and we meet with those local leaders and have the opportunity to hear about the historical significance of some of those landmarks. I'm curious to know what would be your favorite landmark here in Palm Beach County when it comes to our Black history, and why?
Boy, that's
That's a loaded question.
that is difficult. As we go through this, gosh, I go through like, oh gosh, Roosevelt High School. But I go to the storm of 28. The storm of 28 not only affected West Palm Beach, but it affected everything out west. We're talking about Pahokee, Belglade, Micanopy, and South Palm Beach County. That was such a devastating storm. I think it was the second worst in history. And we had worked with Mr. Robert Hazard, Mr. Dorothy Hazard, for years. And Mr. Hazard had developed a knowledge of meteorology and studying the weather. And so in his presentations, he walks you through the development of that storm, at least the 3 days leading into the storm. And one of the other things that he makes reference to is Zora Neale Hurston's book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Because it talks about that storm. It talks about the indigenous people who were here, the Native Americans, who could read the clouds, watch the birds, and they say, a storm is coming, we're getting out of here. And a lot of people didn't listen to them. And the other part was that shoring up the dam out there, it needed a lot of help. It needed a lot of reinforcement because it wasn't as secure as it should have been, especially for this powerful storm that came through. That storm wiped out so many lives. But the African American presence for that storm, that included hundreds and hundreds. We're sure it has to be up into the thousands because they are buried in different places. And so many bodies had to be burned before because of health conditions. But the majority of those people were loaded into dump trucks. There was no respect to who they were in death. And so it was just like loading lumber. And they held, the powers that be held many of the African Americans at gunpoint and forced them to do a lot of this work of either burning bodies or loading them in. And they brought the dump trucks in with the bodies all the way to the end of Tamarind and 25th Street. It wasn't 25th Street at that time, but it wasn't paved as it is. So there is a Storm of 28 memorial that houses approximately maybe just under 700 people who lost their lives in that storm. But many didn't get into that actual site. Some are under Tamarind Avenue.
Yeah.
I mean, Tamarind Avenue.
And 25th,
Yeah, and 25th Street. There are pictures, there are records that show these people at work trying to clear up all of the carnage, all of the loss of lives. So these people were buried at that site. The whites who lost their lives were put into coffins and buried across the street from the Norton Museum. And so there are pictures of that as well. We did a video and talked to, at that time, some of the survivors who were still here, who remembered that storm. And one of the people we talked to was Vera Farrington, who happened to be a little girl at the time, but of course her mother constantly told her the story and kept it alive in her heart. And the other person we talked to was Quarterman Ely, who was a member of my church, but we didn't get to appreciate that history until he was much older, but he constantly would sit us down and repeat this history, and of course we didn't appreciate. And we would say, okay, here's his story again. We almost had it memorized. But I can remember the last time he told the story, and by then we were so much aware about history and the importance of him sharing the story, and how he and his two buddies didn't follow their parents' instructions to get to the church, get to Trinity for their safety, and they decided to try to go to a store to buy some whatever, and how the wind actually blew them from Division Avenue, which is at the top of the hill, all the way down to Douglas, which is where our church was at 8th and Douglas.
Interesting.
And fortunately, when they were able to stand up, they were not injured. But they did get into that church, which was damaged from the storm, and of course it had to be rebuilt. But looking at the work that Robert Hazard and Dorothy Hazard have done over the years to get that site memorialized, it is a beautiful site. It's been supported by the city, and it stands as a replica of these people who lost their lives when maybe it could have been saved if the engineers had worked on the dam.
Yeah, and I know Dorothy is very, very passionate about
She is.
that site and taking care of it, and is just a fierce advocate for not disturbing that site, and we appreciate her very much. So, Dr. Wynn,
Yes.
what would be considered your favorite site or the most significant landmark here in the county?
Oh goodness, that's several. Well, I know in addition to the Storm of 28, Evergreen Cemetery, which was established by local African American, very leaders, prominent African American leaders who came together, and which is one of the first, I would say, Black established cemeteries in 1915. And what I love about it, which I think is fascinating, is that it's kind of tucked away, and but people know about it, but a lot of people don't know about it. You know, they pass down right up the street, which is something that I'm just fascinated as an anthropologist, even just the proximity between the 1928 site on 25th and Tamarine, and you go just a little bit east down that street and make a little quick left on Rosemary is Evergreen Cemetery, which are the, I would say, very prominent African Americans that are settled here and contributed to this city. And I would call the first, and we always talk about the first Black doctor, you know, T. Leroy Jefferson, and Mildred Gildersleeve, our first Black midwife. But then even my great-great-grandparents are buried there, which I didn't even know until a few years ago. And so that site is something that I'm interested in now, but I think it's such a powerful site to a representation of who was here and how this city was established, and those individuals who were key figures in this city and in this county are resting there, and the great need for people to know about it and even restore the tombs, because it is owned by the city. It was owned by a group of very powerful individuals for several years. But then now the city holds it, and they're doing some work with it, but it still needs a lot of work to do, restoring some of those tombs, those graves that's been exposed, and to get back its integrity and dignity in those sites. But that Evergreen Cemetery is such it is a national treasure, I believe, and something that I'm adamant about working towards, to assist in supporting and helping to preserve and share with people how important that site is.
All right. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Mr. Nix, you have a landmark that stands out?
Yeah, very much so. And that's the Martin Luther King Memorial on Flagler. I think it represents both who we are and where we want to go. And it's an ever-present reminder. And I think it's placed, it's kind of like what you said about Evergreen, you can't really figure out where it is. It's placed right where it needs to be placed. And it's an interesting point that is on West Palm Beach side looking towards Palm Beach side. And there's a river, there's a schism right there. And so when he talks about equality for all, and justice for all, this is a great place to have it right
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
Especially with the what happened at the Sticks and moving us over on the
Yeah,
other side
yeah.
of Pleasant City. But the other thing is the flags that are there representing
Yeah.
all of us. An ever-present reminder that we are this beloved community if we can get to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you go up Flagler, there's a lot of things on Flagler, and there it stands. And it's a beautiful
It's
monument.
beautiful.
And there he is, Bible in hand, ever reminding us God's in control.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite.
Yeah.
Beyond the fact that he went to Morehouse
See,
and he's
and he pledged Alpha.
And he-
I don't know what that's about, but everybody's entitled to one mistake. I get it. Everybody can't.
I knew. I know.
So okay, so we're going to change this up a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to do a little rapid fire. I'm going to say one landmark, historical landmark, and just give me the first word that comes to mind, and then we might elaborate on it a little bit more. Let's start here. The Sunset Lounge.
Whew.
So let's start with you, Mr. Nix. Sunset.
I was going to say this, and I know it's political. Tragedy.
Oh
the
yeah.
first word. It is such an iconic place. It represents community in a really big way. And I'm just sad that it hasn't come to fruition just yet. It's sitting there waiting for us. And so that's the first word.
All right. What about you, Sunset?
Enter multi-generational landmark.
That's two words.
Oh, sorry. Multi-generational.
Okay. Okay.
And
Dash.
I say that because the Sunset Lounge, as a next, earlier generation, I had the opportunity to experience something that my mother was able to experience, and you can't say that with most landmarks. I can talk about it, and my, our elders can talk about it, and they may have had similar or very different experiences. And so I think that's the beauty of to be able to say that I was in there before its reconstruction.
Yeah.
And to see and even witness multi-generations sitting and having and being entertained next to each other is a very powerful thing. And it gives testament to the resilience and sophistication and creativity of Dennis and Thelma Starks, because they reshaped it, and they started that, of course, with Bob Saunders and then Dennis and Thelma Starks, but then even recreating of, okay, the big band era is over. How can we continue this legacy and to turn the second and third floors into apartments, 8 apartments?
Yeah.
I mean, how innovative is that, in the entrepreneurship, and then continue it on, and how it's carried on, where you talk to a younger person and they can describe their experience on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
And you can talk to an older and they can describe their experience on the Saturday night. It's such a wonderful thing. And that's when I think of multi-generational experience.
And it's a beautiful facility.
Oh,
They've done a
wow.
really
Goodness.
great job.
Yeah.
And the
Yes.
Heart and Soul Park outside of it, just the ambiance is
Yes.
Brings it
is
all
very
together.
nice. What about you, Miss Debbie?
Yeah, I don't have one word. I just know phenomenal music and musicians.
Okay.
And while we could not go to the Sunset when we were growing up, you had to be 21 to get in. And so I didn't go to that establishment in its heyday, but we could listen and hear who was coming in. And we knew who was coming in because of the music curriculum we had at Roosevelt High School. So if you played in the marching band, you had to participate in the concert band. And then you had to have that connection with the chorus where they did the big band sound. They did the Broadway music. They did the classical. So as you could hear the names, we could associate what we had learned. And we said, oh gosh, they wrote this. They sing this. Oh, we know that title. So we had a different type of knowledge and background than our parents had, because all we could do was listen and hope to get inside of what we would ride by.
Yeah.
You know, we couldn't get there. But I certainly, as Dr. Wynn said, I truly admire Mr. Bob Saunders, who had the idea, who had the motivation to start an entertainment center. And these musicians travel from everywhere. West Palm Beach was the stop to make as they made the circuit. You know,
Chitlin Circuit.
going all the way.
Chitlin Circuit.
Yeah.
Chicken and circuit.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to try this one word thing again.
Okay.
We're going to try it one more time. Roosevelt High School. We'll start with you.
Black excellence. Two
Oh,
words.
two
That's
words.
it.
I
Black
love it.
excellence.
And why do you say that?
Oh my gosh. Roosevelt had the most well-trained, most skilled, most experienced teachers and staff anywhere. And of course, that was related to any black school. There was that presence there of people who had mastered their craft and with skill transferred it to us, often without books. Because sometimes when the books got to us, they were not usable. They had this wealth of knowledge. They had a sense of that they had to build this character within us, tell us why this knowledge was important, how it was going to benefit us. And I tell you too, Dr. Green, that the behavior, the discipline was just above the top. We may not have seen it then, but we knew where the ball stopped.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, we had fun with each other.
It was a different type of discipline back
It
in
was
the
a
day.
different type of discipline. The attire coming into school, everybody dressed. Whatever that economic line was, limitation, you didn't see it in the
Right,
schools.
right.
No, we weren't overly dressed, but we dressed respectfully to come to school, as well as the teachers. We didn't see them out of character at all.
Yeah.
And the things they had us to learn, and especially memorize. So we didn't know early on why we had to memorize certain things, like the preamble to the Constitution. We had to learn that, you know, the Bill of Rights. And they told us later that they were trying to prepare us to register to vote.
Oh, yeah.
And the different things they might ask you, you know, in order to
Right,
fill out this
right,
registration
right,
form. We
right,
didn't know that. So many of those things stayed with us.
Right.
We had the scriptures in the morning. We had prayer. And so you had to bring your scripture with you every morning. You could not say Jesus well. Nobody could say that one. But you had to have
That's
a
the
different
easy one.
scripture.
That was the,
Yeah.
the easy one everybody used to try
Right.
to
So
take.
every day it was a scripture. We had prayer with a PA system. And it was just a family tight school. You were safe. They looked at, they took care of us. And even with the, you know, often you hear, well, what about the sports? Sports was outstanding. But the teachers who taught the sports, the coaches,
Yeah.
they were excellent teachers. And they pushed academics first. And we went to competitions with other black high schools. We competed. And we came back with the superior ribbons. So you not only competed
Of
in
course,
sports and music, but we had something called the Slide Rule Club, a math thing. I was in that. I didn't like math, but I learned how to do the slide rule for some odd reason.
Yeah.
We had the speech and debate. You know.
It was a different sense of community
yeah.
back then.
Yeah.
All right, we got to get one word. We got a couple more to get through, and I don't have a whole lot more time left. But
Right.
one word, Roosevelt.
Well, I wasn't born here, didn't
Okay.
grow up here, didn't go, so, but when I moved here, I moved to Delray. And when you said that the first word I came up with was Carver.
Carver. Okay.
But that's because I'm living in Delray.
Right.
But I'm going to say I can truly understand exactly all that
Okay.
Debbie said about
Okay.
that.
All right.
I grew up with Booker T. Washington in Atlanta. Absolutely the same thing.
Yeah.
Excellence.
Excellent. One word.
I would say pride.
Okay.
Because my parents attended Roosevelt, and even just working amongst alumni, there is a sense of pride that from the start, when they started at Roosevelt, even up to today, our alumni speak so highly of their school, as you can see, and how it has carried even, 40, 50, 60 years later
Right.
of a high school. So to me, that gives a testament to what was instilled in them by their teachers and the surrounding community, a sense of pride in their teachers, themselves, education from all areas of to prepare them for today. And that sense of
Okay.
pride is just it shows on their face when you mention Roosevelt. It's almost like, yes, that is
Yeah,
my school,
that's right.
Yeah.
and we will fight for our school
Yeah.
even today, and to ensure that it's preserved and people know who we are, who we were, and who we are today.
And it's
You know?
something beautiful happening
Yes.
at Roosevelt, the old Full Service Center now. You want to
Right.
talk a little bit about
Yeah, but
what's happening
Let
there?
me put in one other point. Our teachers were so astute at not pouring into us what was happening with the Jim Crow situation out in the community, out in the world. They didn't say, oh, these people are doing this. They didn't do that. But Roosevelt opened after Industrial High School became so crowded. It opened in 1950. And from 1950 to 1970, it graduated some of the best people who became outstanding alumni. And then when desegregation came in, the school was made a middle school, as was most of the black high schools were. And so once the middle school was there, it just eventually closed and started to deteriorate.
Yeah.
And so we were constantly petitioning the school board, talking with them, coming up with different plans to refurbish this building. And of course, they started the groundbreaking in January of 2024. So we'll have a full academic center, especially with the vocational courses. But on the front end of Roosevelt, facing Tamron, we will have a museum, African American Museum, and an African American Research Library and Cultural Center.
Okay. And that is exciting.
It
Very
is,
exciting.
and I was just going to say, and to repurpose it to this, meaning history, black history, where it is located is absolutely the right thing to do. And I know there was some dispute about should it be here. No, it's where it should be, in the community, reminding the community of who we are and what we've done.
Excellent, excellent. I just want to thank you all so much for taking the time today to sit down and to share a little bit about our Black history here in Palm Beach County and throughout the state of Florida. Such an enlightening session, just such a wealth of knowledge here in Palm Beach County, and I really, really am appreciative of your time today.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
so
Thank you.
And,
much.
All right.
appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.